Hello, hello, hello. It's Javier again. Today we're going to be talking about, is it just sex or is it more than sex? It seems in society today, especially with Darwin's theory of evolution, the man is just simply a reproductive creature. Now, this may this may very well be true, but let's really abstract what reproduction means. In many ways, reproduction has been numbed down to just passing one's genes to the next, right? But in fact, I find reproduction itself to be a creative activity. In fact, to be engaged in sex is to already be creating, right? To be in the act of creating. And I feel like science cannot explain, right? They'd only tell you, well, the reason why you enjoy sex is because it produces dopamine, right? And so that's why you feel this sense of enjoyment. But this is rather very numbed down kind of language, right? It's very, very cold, I would say. It's just a very cold sense of language, and it can give a lack of meaning. But using this same principle of reproduction, I would rather reframe reproduction and say, in fact, reproduction is the act of creation, right? The act of creating. It is your creative activity. And so to be a human being is to be, in fact, a creative being, a creative activity itself, right? To be in tandem with the universe as everything else creates and reproduces in some form, right? So I would say to find meaning is, in fact, to find it's in itself the very act of creating. This is what it means to be a human being in many respects, but to simply boil it down to just, cold, irreducible facts such as reproduction, that gives a distorted sense of what the human being really is. It still doesn't explain why dopamine is excreted when sex is engaged, right? It doesn't quite go. I mean, they do go there actually, but the thing is, they only proceed to explain it in terms of specific connections and transmitters and receptors and so forth. But this doesn't quite explain why. Why do we enjoy it? Why are those specific functions? Why do those specific functions exist, and why does that specific hormone exist? Why does dopamine exist at all? Can it be possible that we could have been created without having any sense of enjoyment, right? No thrill in creation, right? So why, in fact, is dopamine excreted when we engage in activities such as sex, to where we feel a real sense of enjoyment, right? A very ecstatic sense of enjoyment. And I feel like science can't really explain this. Only philosophy can. Only philosophy can begin to abstract from this what it really means. It kind of goes back to this question of just, well, why dopamine at all? I mean, if it's very possible that we could have been created and reproduce without having any sense of enjoyment, right? It would just be like our duty. But the very fact that enjoyment is a part of the quality of sex, right? Whether you're just doing this for pure enjoyment or trying to have a child, there's something more to abstract from this. And I believe it's because we are ultimately creative human beings, right? We were birthed from creation, right? We were created. and then we become creative. To be created is to be creative. And so to be in tandem with the universe, to have any connection again, is to in fact create. And I mean this in the very most general principle of creativity and creation, not just sex, but I'm using sex as an example of why is there some ecstatic joy around this participation in sex that starts the production of dopamine, right? Why is it that in the very act of creating one feels the most ecstatic and the most joy is when one is most participatory in the very act of creation. And you can see this in artists, right? In painters and poets. There is something about creating that gives an almost ecstatic joy, right? A meaning is thrusted forth because you are actually, in fact, in tandem with the universe, right? Everything around you is being created, right? Either being diminished and then created again, right? I think reproduction is probably a wrong framing. Rather to say that we are, instead of saying that we are just reproductive entities, I would rather say that we are creative entities, right? Because this encompasses the whole principle of what it means to be a human being and also the universe, right? We not only just create human beings from our own DNA, but we also create things in just general, right? We create dwelling places, we create infrastructures, we create laws, we create cities, we create art, we create music. To be a human being is not to be reproductive, it's to be creative, 100%. And sex is the ultimate symbol of what it means and how it feels to be, in fact, in creation and to be creating. And as I've always said before, to be a human being is not just a category that you're given. To be a human being is a job to do. And so to be a human being, we must be, in fact, preservers and creators. We create to preserve, and we preserve to create.